Okay, so I think pretty much everyone else is here now. Welcome all to this webinar. Can everybody hear me okay? Just put in the chat if there's any issues. Uh, my name's Tess. I'm the School Liaison Officer here at Magdalene College. For some of you who were on our webinar last week or the week before, we talked a little bit about the whole application process. And today I'm going to talk specifically about personal statements. The last webinar is either on our YouTube already or it'll be on our YouTube very soon. So if you want to refer back to that at any point, you can do, and this will join it as well. So it's going to be quite a long webinar tonight. We've got quite a lot to get through. So if you have any like burning questions, you can put them in the chat. But if not, I will come to questions at the end, and we'll try and cover all the questions, in the last like 15 minutes or so. Hopefully everything you ask will be covered already by that point. So this was what we had last week, the kind of overarching application process. And yeah, choosing your course, things like the deadlines for admissions tests, things like the interviews. But today I want to focus specifically on the number 4, the UCAS application, which is your personal statement, it's your teacher reference, and it's things like your predicted grades. And you send the same application to all 5 universities that you choose for the courses that you choose. So what we covered today is not just relevant for Cambridge, but it'll be relevant for any of the universities you apply to. Okay, so UCAS personal statements is a chance for you to reflect on your chosen course, why you want to study it, and why you would be good at it. I know that there's a bit of a tendency, especially in the UK, to not kind of blow your own trumpet. This is a chance for you to say you are actually very good at your course, you'd be a great student, and tell us why, illustrate those, and give us actual examples. Show your interests, your skills, and your experiences, and yeah, selling yourself. So for Russell Group universities and for Oxbridge in particular, we recommend that your personal statement is quite academic. So that means you're not talking about your hobbies and interests. You're not talking about things like your work experience. You're talking about your actual academic skills and interests and why you want to study something for 3 years. Now, obviously, you are playing to the field. You're not just applying to Cambridge. You may be applying to very different universities who have different expectations of you. And therefore, we still say you should maybe include 20% extracurricular or 20% say things like your work experience because you are playing to the field. So if 80% of it is academic and 20% of it is maybe not as academic, you've got a good mixture there, I think. So if you are applying to university this year, so if you're going for 2026 entry, you will have the new personal statements. And then for these new personal statements, instead of just having one big thing to write, you have 3 separate questions. So in the past, students would just have written almost like one long essay, and they could structure that and divide it however they wanted to. And now we've got these 3 questions, and the idea is that this should help you structure it better. Most of this like content that you'd have used previously will be the same. We don't expect you to kind of write things differently or maybe do different things ahead of writing a personal statement in terms of super-curricular. It's just about how it's structured and how you go about answering these questions. So the first one is, why do you want to study this course or subject? What have your qualifications or studies helped? How have your studies and qualifications helped you prepare for this? And what else have you done outside of education? And why is that useful? Now you can see each one has a minimum of 350 characters. It's not a word limit, it's a character limit. So this will include things like punctuation and spaces. But the total personal statement is 4,000 characters max. And therefore you can see if each section is 350 characters minimum, some sections can be longer than that and still not reach that word limit. So, you can probably have 1,200 characters in each section if you wanted them to be equal, but you could, if you wanted to, have, say, 350 for your first one, a much longer second one, and 350 for your last one. It's up to you to divide that however you wish. There is not an upper limit, just as long as each one is at a minimum of 350 characters, that's fine. And if you ever try out, just type in, some sample paragraphs on Word, you'll find that 350 characters is not very much. So, it can be a very short answer to one of these questions if you don't think you've got as much to say for maybe the first one or the last one. I would say the middle one is the one that I would think should be your chunkiest one, and we'll get into that, why I think that. But some people might want to approach this where question 1 and question 3 are a bit of a kind of intro and a bit of a sort of conclusion, and section 2 is, the weight of your personal statement, maybe with a few paragraphs in there. But we'll get into that. So when you apply to Cambridge as well, so Cambridge specifically, you actually have an opportunity to do an additional personal statement. So once you've submitted your UCAS application, and you will submit it early if you're applying to Cambridge, so that'll be the 15th of October, the latest, we will send you a form called the My Cambridge application, or shortened to MyCap. And on this form, there is several things you'll need to fill in. So if you've had any kind of breaks from education, for example, or you might get asked what modules do you study in school. So they might say you do maths, you will write down the topics in maths you've covered already. In English, you'll write down the kind of novels and plays you've read. And this means that when you get to interview, we already know what your kind of subject knowledge is. And so we're not going to ask you a question that's outside of that subject knowledge. If you haven't covered a topic yet in your subject, we're not going to then question you about that at interview because you don't have that knowledge yet. So that is included in the My Cambridge application. Quite a lot about your academics in school is covered. If, say, you weren't able to take an A level because your school didn't offer it, or maybe because of like scheduling conflicts, you can also tell us about that in the My Cambridge application. So it's just a way for us to get a bit more data about you. However, there is also the additional personal statement, and this is optional. It is not compulsory, and you're not going to be discriminated against if you don't have anything to say additional to your personal statement. You may have thought everything that I have to offer is in that personal statement. There's nothing else I want to say. What I would recommend it for mainly is for subjects where the Cambridge course is very different than courses elsewhere. So human, social, and political sciences. Let's say you're applying to politics elsewhere. You may, in that additional personal statement, want to touch on why you like the sociology or anthropology parts of the course, which you might not want to put in that main personal statement. If you're just applying to politics at every other uni, they may be a bit confused about why you're mentioning sociology. So you could kind of save that for the additional personal statement. Maybe you want to touch upon things like the supervision system we have at Cambridge, or maybe there are certain modules in your course that are offered only at Cambridge. You could kind of talk about that in your additional personal statement. But again, it's not compulsory. It's just if you have something else to say, you have an opportunity to do it for about, it's about a paragraph. It's not very long. It's only 1,200 characters. Oh, I'm sorry, I just realized that the slides were, there you go, yeah. So some sample statements. We're going to have a look at some sample statements now. And these are ones that people have used to get into Cambridge. These are what current students have written about, and we've restructured them so that they fit the new kind of 3 questions system. They're all Oxbridge quality, so they're all very good, but they differ in their approach. So you'll be able to see that there's not a one size fits all approach to writing these personal statements. And yeah, we have got a strict plagiarism tool, so just beware. Like if I show you these, you may think they're very good and you may want to take notes from them, maybe look at the super-curricular they've done, but don't be tempted to kind of copy sentences or copy entire paragraphs. UCAS has a very strict plagiarism tool, so you don't want to get caught out if you're copying any of these. So please beware, we're showing you these as an example, but just take inspiration, don't take directly from them. I've just noticed I've had some questions that I'll just address first before I go on. The date, it is the 15th of October. I think one slide said the 16th because it was when the 15th fell on a Saturday and it was for the Friday deadline, but it is the 15th of October. I apologize for that. Okay. So question 1, why do you want to study this course or subject? So this one, it would be quite good to mention skills or things that you're interested in this course. I think in the first question, unless you want to maybe use it as more of an introduction, this is quite a good way to say, this is why I want to do it. This is what caught my eye about this subject and why I really like it. And maybe some skills or some knowledge you already have that could kind of prove in that opening sentence why you want to do it and why you'd be good at it. So I've got some samples now you'll see, and hopefully this answers some of the questions already about super-curriculars. I've seen some questions about that in the chat. Hopefully this will cover it. If it doesn't, ask me at the end. Just for now, hold back on questions until we get to the end in case they're covered in the slides. So I've kind of broken this down into skill, evidence, and reflection. So you can hopefully see the color coding in the next few slides, how I've tried to show that you can kind of bring those skills in immediately. You've only got 4,000 characters. You don't want to waste too much of it just kind of saying nice, fluffy things to introduction, saying, I've always been passionate about X, Y, Z since I was a child. You can go straight in and say, I did this and that's why I really like the course. Don't waste those characters. So, for example, I'll give you a few minutes to read these. But again, if you think about the blue as the skills, the red as the evidence, and the green as the evaluation, you can see that these really kind of take hold immediately. Okay, as you're reading these, if anyone has any comments about things that they think are quite interesting about these or things that they've done well, feel free to put those in the chat, have a bit of a discussion about them. I've tried to include a range of subjects and you'll see in the next few slides some more examples. So the color coding, again, is the blue is the skill, the red is the evidence, and the green is the evaluation. So just there, you can kind of see, medicine. They've identified some skills already, and what they have. They've talked about, some examples of what they've done. So they've done a workshop, they've brought a kit, they've done something that's maybe more passive. They've attended a lecture or a workshop, but they've also kind of then been inspired and brought something and kind of tested it out at home, and they've evaluated how that improves their skills. Yeah, someone said very straightforward. I think that's true. I think a lot of people start their personal statement, they don't know how to begin it, and they kind of say, I've always been passionate about this, or they try to have like an inspirational quote. I think it's fine to just immediately say, I know that the medicine course requires these skills, or I know that engineering is about this, and I have that skill already, and show, don't waste your time in any way. I've got some humanities ones in the next few slides, so I'll try and cover a few examples for each question. So this one again, this one I cut out their introductory sentence because it's quite long and I didn't think it was all necessary. But they talked about how much they love history, and then their first paragraph was about this. So, they've kind of said why do they want to do this course? They've shown, their main part of history that they like. Yeah, again, I'll give you a minute to read it. And again, if you have anything that you think really stands out about these, feel free to put them in the chat and try to evaluate how good they are. Like I said, of course, this will be recorded and you'll get to see it on YouTube, but if you want to take screenshots or photos of these slides and to refer back to, I understand I'm going quite quickly through these, but I don't want to not get to the end. I know this is quite a lengthy presentation. And finally, this one for theology. I think this one's quite useful because it has a really original approach by saying that they are interested in mental health as well as theology. And, it kind of jumps in and says, these are my interests. And, this is what I can bring to the course already, about why they want to do it. So these are some examples, obviously, from the first one about why you like the course, why you're interested in it, why you want to study it. So people have kind of talked about their different interests within the course, and they've gone quite specific. You can see this one talked very specific about mental health. She's talked about certain books that she's read already, about things like, yeah, liberation theory, and kind of showing that she's got these skills already with that English translation. And she's also evaluated, and she said, I prefer this discussion over this discussion. It's not just say a list of things that they've done, but they've actually evaluated what they've done already to say why they like the course. So move on to question 2 now. This one is about how your qualifications and studies have helped you prepare for this course or subject. And I just want to be really clear about this one. We're somewhat worried that students may interpret this question to be just tell us about how your A levels are relevant to the course because it has that term qualifications. I wouldn't fall into that trap. I think you need to interpret qualifications and studies as just quite broadly about your academic development. So obviously, like I said, in that My Cambridge application, we know exactly what you're studying in school. We know what exam board your course is part of. We know what modules you've done already. We know what books you're studying if you're doing something like English. So you don't need to go into that in your personal statement. You don't want to waste those characters on talking about your A-level courses. So I think instead use question 2 to really evaluate the academic work you've done, maybe outside of school, or maybe things like an EPQ or a project that you've worked on in school. But I think something outside of just your kind of like your modules in school, your classes. And I think this one, I've just highlighted the evidence here, not so much the evaluation, I've just highlighted the evidence, but this is really good super-curricular that you can pick up on here. So this person applying for English, they've gone quite specific. As you can see on this page, I said, explore examples in depth that you really like, and you can go quite niche and quite specific. This person has done that. They've talked a lot about things like Greek mythology and kind of more traditional tales and how they've been adapted in kind of modern literature. So you'll see here, yeah, she's talked about Hades Sound, so she talks about play, and then you've got 2 fairly modern novels, so Circa and the Penelope, and then she's even got things like how she's done an essay for an essay competition. And then finally, she's kind of talked about the skills that she's maybe developed and how that can feed into the other like things that she's interested in with that course by Uni of York, How to Read a Poem. And this is an online course. I imagine it was free. Yes, this is an answer for question 2, just for the comment. So you can see here, she's kind of talked about her interests very specifically, and then about how she's trying to improve her skills as well for that kind of Uni of York course. I think especially for courses like English, some people are a bit worried about how to kind of include students at super-curricular. How do you not just list novels that you like? How do you actually make it sound a bit more academic? I think having that kind of central thing to work around, so things like this, it's Greek mythology and modern adaptations, a central theme is a quite good way of kind of evaluating, or maybe bring in novels that you like with some theory. So maybe you like the Brontes. Is there certain like kind of feminist theory of literature? Is there something about that era that you like? Can you kind of read around that period of time? I think that's a really great way to not just list books you're interested in, but how you're also bringing in the skills that you need to do an English lit degree. Okay, moving on. This one, again, really niche topic, so there's quite a lot on here. But this would be a great kind of bulky answer to the question 2. This is about 1,700 characters, so you can tell that this would really be like all you'd need to write for question 2 if you then had fairly chunky first and third question answers as well. So this person, yeah, talking a lot about Japanese architecture, talking about the article they read about it, and then a book by a different author, um, and then yeah, looking at certain artists and certain architects that they like. So you can see they've kind of done different types of super-curricular, but all around the same topic. So they're really honing in on that one area. I think it's quite useful as well in the second paragraph to maybe have that chain or that thread going through. So I read this, and from that I was inspired to read this. From that, I discovered this. I think um, it makes it a bit easier to read, and we can see how your interests are kind of developing, and it shows that research skill. In a lot of undergraduate degrees, you'll have to do something like a dissertation or maybe a project where you have to demonstrate that research skill that you can kind of take an idea and go deep, go into rabbit holes, lots of reading, lots of research. And I think if you can already show that skill in your personal statement, you'd be such a great candidate for somewhere like Cambridge. You already have that natural curiosity to kind of go deeper and deeper into a subject. Okay, so more STEM-based ones now. This one's for biological and natural sciences. Um, this person has mentioned work experience, and I just want to touch on this. Work experience is not compulsory, especially not for biological and natural sciences. The only course it's really compulsory for is medicine. But obviously, if you have work experience and you think it's relevant to talk about, if you think you've learned something from it, then by all means include it in a personal statement. So this is obviously an example. This person managed to get work experience abroad. Again, you do not need to go and get work experience abroad in order to get into Cambridge. It's just they managed to get this, and therefore, if they found something worthwhile to write about, they included it. However, the rest of this paragraph is obviously about their EPQ, which is something that I imagine is available to a lot of students in school. They've written a lot about their EPQ here. So they've kind of talked about their qualifications in that respect, but they've gone a bit broader than just what they're learning in biology class and talking about their own research and what they've done in order to kind of work towards their EPQ. Again, if you find anything really kind of that stands out about these, feel free to comment on them and we can kind of, yeah, reflect on them and analyze them a bit. I think again, what's quite impressive about this one is, I mean, I'd never studied biology, but I can't imagine this disease, or this rapid aging disorder is covered in your biology spec. So she's gone beyond, well, he or she has gone beyond the syllabus here, for their EPQ. Um, so I think, yeah. So you can talk about things you're doing in school. You can talk about projects or things like the EPQ, but it's just about not kind of still evaluating a bit beyond just your normal classes. And yeah, the enthusiasm really does come through. Somebody mentioned that. I think so, yeah. Um, I think it's about demonstrating these examples, demonstrating all the things they've read is possibly a better way to show that enthusiasm than just kind of using words like I'm passionate about. I think it's a bit of it's a show not tell, really. And we'll get onto that. And finally, one for medicine. Yeah, so someone's just asked us to talk about an EPQ also demonstrate an ability to research well and in depth. It absolutely does, yeah. Obviously, you will have a predicted grade normally for your EPQ. So that also shows, if you're predicted an A or an A star on your EPQ, then it also shows you can research well. But I think, yeah, if you show like this person has done, they talked about how they propose certain theories and, therapies, and they've read certain books for it, they've researched this disorder, you've kind of shown that you can research well and in depth, much like, I was talking about with architecture. So I think if you have an EPQ project that is relevant to the degree you want to do, by all means, go into depth on that and talk about it in your personal statement. You've probably done a lot of research for it, so it's well worth talking about. And back to the medicine one, I'll give you a minute to read this. And this is obviously an example of where you would talk about your work experience, which is necessary for medicine. So yeah, you can kind of evaluate, not just saying that you did the work experience, but evaluating what you gained from it, and maybe therefore what part of medicine you're interested in, or if you learned some skills from it. And this person has talked about following up with research about pediatric A&E, intriguing. Yeah, so I think it's useful to not just kind of state that you did it, but talk about what you took from it, what you've learned. Maybe if you followed it up with research, again, it shows that research skill. Do you think what's quite useful about this one for medicine finally is obviously understanding that to study medicine, it's not just about, getting those top grades, being very good at science, but it's about having that bedside manner, that understanding of what the job involves, and things like the kind of ethical debates as well. I think they've brought that up here quite well. So having maybe an appreciation of that and, demonstrating it in your personal statement is quite useful. If it's like relevant to your personal statement, I think it's good to put that in. People have asked for medicine, does work experience have to be in person or can it be virtual? I believe it can be virtual, yeah. And obviously you could evaluate that in a very different way. I think work experience, I'm not sure about other universities. Cambridge, for medicine, we're not that strict about it, and I have a slide about that. So I wouldn't worry too much about work experience for Cambridge. It's probably worth doing some research about the other universities you're interested in and asking, what are their kind of requirements for work experience and would they accept virtual? But I believe Cambridge would.
Prevent.
Okay, and finally, question 3: what else have you done outside of uni or outside of education, and how are these experiences useful? So this is a good time to talk about your extracurricular activities. So when I talked at the beginning about that 80% and 20%, you could have kind of used that 80% in the first two questions and then save that 20% for the question 3 and just talk about extracurricular. Or you could just talk about things outside of education, such as course-related field trips or university workshops, or if you've done things like D&V, if you think that's relevant to include. So it's good to give examples. Don't just list loads of skills, but some examples, and I'll show you some again here. Somebody has asked whether we should limit complex vocabulary to stay within the word count. I think that would be very much up to you and how you write. You've seen lots of examples now already, and I guess, do you think that it's complex vocabulary? Or do you not think that? I don't know. I think a lot of them are very well written, but I don't think they use like kind of very complex terminology outside of just the things that they've read. Just remember, I know that the idea of applying to Cambridge seems quite mysterious, quite scary, and you think there's going to be some, old, really wise professor reading your personal statements, and you need to have some kind of, air of, this academic tone about you. You don't. They're a person, and you're a person, and you're just writing about how you genuinely like this course and what you've done to prepare for it. So I think write well, use correct grammar and punctuation, etc. And if you have specific terminology that you understand, use it, but don't feel like you have to use a thesaurus, for example, to write your personal statement. Just write how you think represents you best. Someone has asked which question would we put our work experience in. So you see that someone mentioned it in question two. I think putting your work experience in question two would maybe be best because it's outside of you can kind of say it's your studies in that respect. If work experience is relevant to your course, if it's quite academic, I think you could put it in question two. I think if it's more just work experience, talking about random skills, so maybe things like I did work experience and it shows things like time management or good communication skills, I would say it's more question three. I think it's about how you evaluate that work experience. And if you did work experience and it made you fall in love with that subject, that course, maybe you did a work experience in a lawyer's office and you suddenly were like, this is it for me. Maybe that's question one. Maybe you say, it was because I did this work experience that I now know I want to study law. So I think where you put it is more about how you're going to evaluate that work experience rather than the thing itself, if that makes sense. And finally, there's another one just for this, and then I'll be answering the other questions. Someone said, is it okay to mention the names of other universities? Would it put other uni choices off? I don't think so, no. Um, the university just wants the best students for them. If that person has done an online course of another university, they're not going to turn down the student who may be amazing. Um, because they all know that you're trying to get these resources from wherever you can. And if you therefore can go to a lecture at a university that's local to you, but then apply to a university that's not local, that's fine. I don't think the people reading your personal statements would be offended that you've done something with another university, because ultimately you've chosen one of your five choices to be them through the UCAS form. So I think it's fine. I've read plenty of personal statements applying to Cambridge who have mentioned Oxford and things they've done at Oxford, as well as other universities, including universities abroad if people are international students. So I think it's completely fine to mention other unis. So you can see here, these are quite different. The geography one is very much more kind of extracurricular, talking about their skills of things like, being head girl, being a maths tutor, D of E, whereas the engineering one is a bit more about, actual problems that they've done outside of school, but it's still quite academic. And they've talked about, yeah, doing the UK Maths Challenge and getting a silver in that. So again, there is no one size fits all approach to this. I know in an ideal world, we'll just tell you exactly how to write them in a very formulaic way, and you'd be able to kind of do it to tick box exercise. Your personal statement allows you a bit more freedom to that than that, and I think embrace that, like write it how you think represents you best. If you want to put things in certain is an answer to a certain question, just kind of shuffle around how you go about evaluating it, and I think it will fit most questions. Oh yeah, someone has said engineering would be super rather than extra. Yeah, I don't think the last one has to be extracurricular. That's what I was saying. If I go back, here, it can be an area for extracurricular. Alternatively, you could use it to talk about just things you've done outside of education in general. So things like essay competitions or problem solving, or things like UK Maths Challenge. Okay, hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea about how you could approach the three questions. Um, there is no strict formula. And I don't think any university, if you kind of mention something in question one that they think could maybe fit in question three, they're going to turn you away about it. The idea of the three questions is just to help guide you and give you a bit of a structure. It's not so that we have another way to examine you. So please don't stress too much about whether things fit better in one question or the other. Just think about how you would like to structure your paragraphs and how you'd like to, kind of feed one thing into the next, and it will probably become quite natural which one it fits into. Um, if you are really confused, I think a great way to maybe start is to kind of do it as a bit of an introduction. What made you first realize you wanted to do this course? Was that from reading a book, or was that maybe from just something you did in school? And use that as question one. Question two can be your big chunky paragraph about how you're not analyzing all the supercurricular you've done. And then question three could just be about those, that's extracurricular rather than supercurricular. And things like, leadership skills or teamwork or things like, being a maths tutor. That may be more suitable for question three. Um, and you don't need to have it on things like awards in essay competitions or in Olympiads in order to put them in because they're still showing that kind of keenness to do the course. If you're going out of your way to do these additional challenges, it shows you're enthusiastic about the course, especially essay competitions. Sometimes, hundreds of people enter a competition and there's one winner. It doesn't mean that it's not worth you putting it on there because you're still probably very talented and you may have, got quite far in the essay competition without winning it. and it shows you've done that research skill. An essay competition is very similar to an EPQ in that respect, in that you can kind of analyze things that you've done towards that essay competition or that project or whatever it is you're doing. You can analyze that in the same way that that person before analyzed their EPQ. Okay, so I'll just go on to some tips. So tip number one, keep it personal. As you can see, with a lot of these examples that we've covered, they're all quite personal. They're all very different, and they're different because people talk about their own interests and the things that they've done. They're not just generically talking about the course. So this one about the medical profession, it could literally have just been lifted from Wikipedia. It doesn't talk about their experiences or their skills or why they want to study medicine. It just says it shows that they can kind of evaluate what a doctor does or what a doctor should do, but it doesn't say anything about themselves. So I think try and keep it all personal in this. I think this would be quite a bad example. And again, I mentioned this before, but show, don't tell. I think it's great to say, I'm logical, I have great time management, or, I'm trustworthy, but you can't just list these things and not give evidence to them. So kind of saying, I worked on this and this shows how I have, this logical thinking, or yeah, the skills that you have, the skills that you're listing, back them up with things that you've done. You could see before when I did the breakdown of the kind of skill, evidence, and then analysis in that question one, lots of people kind of showed evidence for it. They showed probably more evidence than they showed skills, so they really backed it up. Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about supercurricular and where you can find some supercurricular if you're still feeling like you haven't, got enough things to be writing about. I know that these personal statements can seem quite scary. Some of them seem very academic. Sounds like they've read quite a lot. Um, but you've got time in your hands now. You've got all of the summer holidays to be writing it. You've still got, things like the May half term. So don't worry about it. You've got time. A lot of people haven't even chosen which course they want to do yet. When I applied to Cambridge, I didn't write my personal statement until around July or August, and that included reading everything for it as well, because I wasn't sure what course I wanted to do until around the end of June. So you've got time in your hands. Don't worry if you haven't, if you feel like this is quite intimidating. But we'll go into what actually is a supercurricular and therefore whether you should include it or not on your personal statement. Hopefully this will clarify some of the questions I've been getting. So is it relevant to the subject you want to study? And I mean, is it really relevant? Is it related to something you will actually study at uni? Is it related to something that's on one of the modules at Cambridge or at whichever university you're applying to? Is the thing that you've done relevant? Is it not part of your school course content? So not a part of something you've done actually in a lesson. Things like EPQs, I kind of see that as a bit outside of it, but is it not part of your actual syllabus? And is it good quality academic? Is it good academic quality? So, where are you getting this from? Is it, a decent, kind of broadsheet newspaper, or is it a TV show? People kind of talk about things like TV shows that they like. It's not academic quality, really, is it? So yeah, as long as it meets those criteria, it counts. And super versus extracurricular. So extracurricular, as you kind of saw in those like final question three answers, it might be something more to do with like sport, volunteering, a hobby, part-time work. If you are in employment, that's great. It's a great thing to put on your CV. It's not really relevant for your personal statement because it's not academic. Um, However, supercurricular instead would be much more subject-based. So things like reading a book about your subject, essay competitions, researching a topic, work experience where relevant, podcasts, videos, documentaries. I mean, you saw so many examples of them in those personal statements. They mentioned supercurricular after supercurricular, and they were all really varied. Some people read articles, some people did EPQs, some people did essay competitions, some people read novels. So there's not a better or worse supercurricular. And I mean that honestly, it's not that some books are like, heavy books are secretly better. Um, Honestly, whatever makes you interested in that course and whatever you understand is the best supercurricular for you. Some more, and again, feel free to take screenshots here. They may be things that are kind of useful for you. I think someone just has to go back a slide. Is it that one that someone wanted? Okay, we'll continue. So yeah, these are some great ways. I think doing them may be more relevant for especially some STEM subjects. Doing things like Olympiads or maybe projects may be more relevant than reading and watching. There may not be as many kind of documentaries about physics as there are about history, for example. And here's some I really like, and I'm actually just going to demonstrate both Oxbridge Intelligence and Gresham College because I think it's a really great kind of ways to start exploring a topic if you haven't already. So just check. Um, and also my um, can people see that the Oxbridge Intelligence slide? This is yeah, okay. This is a website made by Oxford and Cambridge students. And they have a list of subjects that students study and things that they're interested in. So let's say you're interested in geography, but you're not really sure what you want to write about, or you're not sure how to find super-curricular. You might go on here, and there's a list of articles that students have written. So you can see there's ones about biopolitics, camps, intersectionality, low carbon transport. So say you like sustainability, you like kind of you're interested in things like climate change. You may therefore read this article. And it was written by a geography student at Oxford. It was written a few years ago, and it's a 3-minute read. So it's not going to take you much time. If you just have, 5 minutes to kill and you think, I'd like to explore a topic in more depth, you might read this. You can say, yeah, not really long. And at the end, they put some further reading. And they've got, I think this is probably a book. This is an article, and it's like 10, 15 pages long. Um, yeah, another article here, and not very long either. So you can go on this website and you can see all the different courses that they have. You can read about a topic very briefly. It's only going to take you 5 minutes. All of them will say how long they are. And then you can find more things. So if you liked it, you know where to go next. If you didn't like it, it's okay. You've only wasted 3 minutes. So I really like Oxbridge Intelligence. It's made by students, so the language is quite accessible. It's not overly academic. And another one I really like is Gresham College. So this is like an online lecture platform, and they're offered by lots of different universities. So let's say you like, let's see, browse all. So you want to study literature. Maybe you're really interested in writing after Windrush. Maybe you're interested in things like, kind of civil rights history. Writing after Windrush, you might watch this lecture, and it's provided by a professor at Oxford. So you can watch a University of Oxford lecturer talking about a very niche topic. You could just read lots of kind of literature from this era, from maybe Black authors. This may be something that interests you, and that would be a really great way to be quite niche and quite specific, and have a really like kind of targeted personal statement. But again, you can kind of browse all these lectures if you wanted to, find lots of different information on here. Um, okay, this is probably my cue to get off here. Um, okay, so back to this. As you can see here, lots of different examples. That was just some that I really liked. By no means limited to these slides I've got up. But yeah, I really like Oxford Intelligence. I like Gresham College. I think they're very good at being quite introductory. And yeah, if you're more of a STEM orientated person, those lectures are still relevant, of course, but Enrich Maths, I Want to Study Engineering, and Isaac Physics are probably your best bets. Isaac Physics is created by Cambridge University. Enrich Maths, the maths professors here love it. They talk about how similar the maths questions and Enrich Maths are to the kind of maths questions we ask at interview. So you're very welcome as a STEM student to write in your personal statement, I like solving problems on Isaac physics or enriched maths. Like that can be super curricular as much as reading a book. Saying that you enjoy problem solving and certain types of questions counts as super curricular. It doesn't have to be kind of reading a chunky textbook. Um, Podcasts are good if you like, again, quite overviews of subjects. Um, Melvin Bragg's In Our Time podcast on Channel 4. It's on Radio 4, but it's also on most podcast like kind of platforms. It's fantastic. He gets academics on every week to talk about a different subject. So one week he might get some literature academics to talk about Virginia Woolf. And then he might get some, physicists to talk about black holes. So every week it's a very different topic, and they've got experts from different universities talking about that topic. So, um, yeah, I think In Our Time is a really great way to start. And again, I think that has a reading list normally online with the podcast episode, so you can find out, how to delve deeper into that subject. So supercurricular activities more STEM based. I know that a lot of supercurricular when I show these examples, they're quite yeah, maybe humanities orientated. So here are some really great STEM ones. Obviously, not all schools will like kind of offer you the opportunity to enter Olympiads. They might not offer things like UK Maths Challenge. That's fine. You don't have to have entered a competition. So that's why I said you can just do things like STEP questions or the Isaac physics questions, or I went to study engineering. Maybe you've done the EPQ on something within your topic. So the person I showed you before, the biological natural sciences one, analysed their EPQ. So you can still talk about EPQs that are more science-based than kind of arts and humanities. Um, yeah, and problems you enjoy solving, that's fine as well. I would say I don't think the person statement has as much weight in the STEM subjects as it does in kind of arts and humanities. I think um, things like your admissions test and your interview possibly count a bit more. So hopefully that therefore takes the pressure off that your personal statement maybe isn't as important as your admissions test, because in a lot of the arts and humanities subjects there isn't an admissions test. So therefore your personal statement maybe has a bit more weight. So I wouldn't worry too much about having the perfect personal statement if you're a STEM student as opposed to an arts and humanities one. But I don't know what other universities think about that. So again, still be proud of your personal statement, try it and write the best one you can. But I think Cambridge possibly puts more weight on the admissions test and interviews. Um, and yeah, a note on work experience. I've seen a lot of questions about this. Um, I think calm down about work experience. So work experience can be a form of supercurricular when it is relevant to the course you are doing. Um, it is expected for medicine and for vet med. But even here, as you can see here, there's no required amount. We don't specify a certain amount of hours or a certain amount of kind of weeks you've been committing to it. However, other universities might. So it's worth kind of seeing what all of the universities you're applying to asks for before you kind of commit to your work experience. But we don't have a required amount. When I've spoken to the medicine kind of director of studies here and I've asked her about it, she says that the work experience is more for you than it is for Cambridge. She very honestly says it's about you knowing what you're getting into when you sign up for a 6 year course. Because at Cambridge, medicine is 6 years, so is vet med. It's about you knowing that you want to be a doctor and you're ready to commit. So you do that work experience to understand what the medical field is actually about and what is the working conditions like. So for us, it's not about you proving that you've done work experience. It's about you knowing deep down that this is right for you. Other unis may have a very different perspective, but I'm just saying don't stress too much about work experience for Cambridge. Um, and as I've been saying throughout, it's a lot more about your reflections and about what you learned from that and why it's relevant to the course than it is about how good it looks. You may have done work experience in a very prestigious law firm, but if you have nothing to say about it, if you don't understand how it's relevant to actually studying law, then it's probably not something you should write about. You're not telling us why you want to be a lawyer or be an engineer. You're telling us why you want to study law, study engineering, study medicine. So it's about applying what you maybe did in that physical, that kind of person that work experience to academic subject. It's about taking that, practical skill that you maybe developed and putting it into an academic context. So yeah, I guess take from that what you want. You by no means need to have work experience. I never had any. A lot of my friends never did. The only people I know who had work experience were the medics. Um, so yeah, you don't have to do it. Don't feel pressure to get work experience. If you have it and you think it's relevant to your course, you can write about it. You may just want to do it for other reasons than uni. You might just want to flesh out your CV. Maybe you can get paid for your work experience. Maybe it's not voluntary, but you're actually going to get paid, and therefore it may be something that you want to do for that reason. But don't stress too much about work experience, basically. So if you don't know what you want to do yet, so you're kind of thinking, how do I start reading about a subject if I don't even know what I want to do yet? A great place to start is obviously that website I showed you, Oxbridge Intelligence, because you can kind of cover a range of different subjects in a very short time span. You're not wasting your time because you can kind of read an article from geography, an article from politics, and in the same couple of minutes. However, some more advice, just kind of nurture your interest and curiosity. Maybe you don't know what you want to study yet, but you do know what you're just interested in generally. So maybe you're interested in things like climate change and activism, and therefore you're like, this could be relevant to geography or politics or sociology or law or even things like philosophy. Read about the subject itself, read about climate change from those different angles, and just kind of nurture that curiosity and interest and see if that falls more naturally into place. Um, I know lots of people who applied for subjects like geography and got in for geography and then switched actually because a lot of these subjects are very interdisciplinary. A lot of people switch into things like HSBS. People switch between things like law and philosophy. I'm not saying that this is very common in Cambridge for people to switch courses. I'm just saying the students who apply here are often very good at different subjects and are very interested in different subjects and are not necessarily certain on what they want to do. They can't pin it down because they're just interested in lots of different things. And that's not a bad thing to be. So therefore, if you want to do super curricular, I would argue that you should just read about something you're interested in as a topic and then later on kind of find out how that steers towards a certain course and how you can make it sound relevant for that course. So if you have interests, go for them. I was very interested in things like fashion and textiles, and looking at things like sweatshop labor and things about how like fashion can be political. So I read about things like the veil in France. There was obviously things like the hijab veil ban in France. I read about sweatshop labor. I read about material culture, and then that sort of steered towards human social political sciences. I was reading about kind of fashion in a political way, but obviously that could have gone in a very different way. Um, so I kind of just read about a topic I liked, and therefore most of my personal statement was about fashion and textiles, looking at it through this political and sociological lens. So again, you can kind of find your topic first and then apply it to a subject. Uh, and then finally, don't just do something for the sake of saying you've done it. Don't just kind of pick the biggest, heaviest textbook and read it just so you can kind of prove that you're smart. Do things that genuinely interest you. Um, some final places to look for ideas. Um, again, take a screenshot of this if you want to. I'll just leave it up for a minute so you can have a read of this. Um, yeah, have a look at some of the other colleges. They will have things that are very relevant. Um, a lot of the courses have reading lists online. A lot of those reading lists are kind of recommended things for when you get in and you're kind of like between your A levels and starting uni. They say, if you want to kind of prepare yourself for the course, you could read around the subject a bit. So a lot of them are kind of intended for students who are about to start uni. So they may be quite advanced, maybe a bit complicated, but you're very welcome um to yeah, start reading some Cambridge Uni reading lists or even things like first and second year reading lists. They may have books that are still accessible to you. Um, and yeah, Sydney Sussex have that beyond the syllabus page, which I think is quite useful. And then I did show you a bit before about how to use a bibliography or footnotes with the Oxbridge Intelligence page. But if you read something and you think it's really interesting and you're like, I want to go into this subject more, I want to go into depth with it, look at the bibliography of that article or that book or whatever it is you're reading, and look at the footnotes, and that might help you kind of, delve deeper into that subject and really refine that research skill. Um, for some subjects, it's probably quite important to be on top of current news, maybe writing about that in your personal statement even. So maybe kind of new developments in your subject. So maybe in engineering or biology, is there new developments in the news? In history, have certain things like recently been kind of uncovered that like are kind of necessary? Is there maybe new additions of things that you might want to reflect upon? And if you get really stuck, ask your subject teachers. Chances are they studied that subject at degree. So if you maybe want to do history and you study history at A level, ask your history A level teacher if they have further recommendations of books, or if you have certain interests, what would they recommend you look into? They're probably quite knowledgeable about the subject beyond the syllabus that you do in school, so they're a good like kind of starting point. Um, as you're doing this, it's good to kind of keep reflecting on it, write some notes about it because you don't want to read everything now and then write your personal statement in August and you've forgotten everything you've read. So do kind of reflect on it. Um, building those connections is quite good. So having that chain, like I was saying, that thread throughout your personal statement, just one thing lead to another thing, has one inspired something else. Um, and yeah, take time to kind of challenge it. You don't need to write that everything that you read was brilliant and you're so inspired and everyone is correct. You can challenge things in your personal statement. If you're reading an article that's got a bias or an opinion that you don't agree with, you can kind of critique it in your personal statement as long as you can kind of back it up and make a decent, compelling argument against it. That's fine. Argue against it. I think the theology one that I showed you before, they kind of argued that they preferred one text over the other, and they thought one argument was better than the other. You can do that. And the get used to talking about it, I think that's really key for Cambridge and Oxford because if you get to an interview, you may be asked about things in your personal statement, especially in the humanities. If you say you like certain, areas of history or maybe architecture or history of art, if there's certain people that you're interested in reading about, they might then base the interview around that. So you need to be quite used to talking about that subject. So yeah, maybe talk to your friends, family, teachers, even just yourself, kind of, kind of talking as if you're on your own podcast. Like it's fine, just get used to knowing it quite in depth, really knowing the kind of arguments of these different thinkers, the different books you're reading, what are the key arguments, what are the pros and cons, and that will help. Um, And yeah, consolidate it in a large project if you get the chance. So if you can maybe make it into an EPQ or into a project. At my sixth one, we just they asked us to do a presentation early year 13, so just before we submitted our UCAS. Over the summer, they asked us to kind of just make a little presentation. We'd do it in our form groups. So the things that I'd written about my personal statement, I just made into a little PowerPoint. I then stood up in front of my form and I did it without notes. Like that was kind of my challenge to myself, that I wouldn't be reading notes, so I would know it that well that I could just kind of talk right naturally about what I was interested in with that kind of fashion political like perspective. And so that was a really great way for me to kind of consolidate what I'd done. So I would challenge you, if you don't do already do things like an EPQ or do things like a project, to kind of just do a presentation like that, or make your own kind of project so that you can consolidate that knowledge. And which ones to include, obviously, uh, just things to kind of be thinking about as you're reading them and choosing which ones to include. Um, is it relevant to your subject? Did it make you want to learn more about your subject? Um, and if someone asked you to discuss this, if someone picked up on that on an interview, would you actually want to talk about it? And would that show your enthusiasm? Or are you just writing about it because you think it sounds impressive? Like, just know with Cambridge, anything you write could be potentially asked about in an interview. So make sure it's things that you actually genuinely like and are good at talking about, and are true. Don't just say you read it when you didn't actually read the book or whatever it is you said. Um, yeah, quality, not quantity of enrichment. It's not just about listing lots and lots and lots of super curricular, but evaluating them and showing how they're useful to the course. If you're not enjoying it, it's probably not the right subject for you, or maybe not the right area of that subject for you. So move on. Find a different supercurricular. I read lots of things to do with politics that did not interest me. It didn't mean the course was wrong. It just meant that that wasn't where my interest fell in the course. I read a lot about things like neoliberalism and like kind of Thatcherism, and I found it all quite dry, and that wasn't for me, and that was okay. And yeah, letting your own voice stand out, your interests and experiences help you stand out. As you saw, a lot of these are really quite niche. A lot of the really good personal statement examples were really quite specific and niche, and they had their own kind of personal interests. So let that come through. Okay, this is my last slide. So it's 6:03 now. I'm going to stop recording, and then I have about 10, 15 minutes to answer questions if you have any.